These are the years when a man becomes the man he's going to be for the rest of his life. Just be careful who you change into. You're feeling this power of becoming a man, and with this great power comes great responsibility.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. So, those of you who have been following my channel will know that I recently reviewed the two Spider-Man games on PS1. Now I'm going to be reviewing the movie license games, starting with Spider-Man the Movie, released in 2002, developed by Treyarch, and it's going to be for the Xbox version. This is of course based on the 2002 Spider-Man movie, directed by Sam Raimi, which just happens to be one of my personal favourite movies of all time. It's definitely my favourite superhero movie. The game pretty much follows the same formula as the PS1 games, but with superior technicalities and more versatility. The game is basically a third-person action-adventure platformer, follows the story of the movie very loosely. At the beginning of the game you get a short training tutorial, and the great thing about the tutorial is, it's narrated by Bruce Campbell.
Well, you're easily impressed, aren't you? You haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet.
He brings a huge amount of charisma and charm to the tutorial and introduces you to the game's overall controls, combat and technicalities.
I'm gonna grab a ham sandwich. Whenever you're done beating bad guys up, follow your compass and height meter. That was a good sandwich.
Throughout the game there will also be hints that you can find, which are also narrated by Bruce, as he delivers them with some witty remark each time. Once the training tutorial is over, you play as Spider-Man as he attempts to track down the man who murdered his Uncle Ben, and bring him to justice. You start off with an outdoor level, where you swing around the city, beating up thugs on rooftops, and looking for answers. This gives you an introduction into the outdoor gameplay and the platforming mechanics, as well as some of the basic combat. Once the first level is complete, you get a couple of indoor levels introducing you to the indoor gameplay. The indoor levels are more combat and strategy based, with some basic stealth mechanics, more on those later. So the game's combat is in many ways very similar to the PS1 games, although is much more refined and varied. You can punch and kick enemies and use a variety of web attacks. You have your standard trap webbing for temporarily incapacitating enemies. You also have your impact webs once again, which are basically web balls that do damage on impact. You have the web gloves, which basically act like knuckle dusters, making your punches harder and more effective. You also have a web dome, which encases Spidey in a protective dome that explodes, doing damage to nearby enemies. You also have a web yank that hilariously can be used to yank enemies off roofs and flat out murdering them. You also have sections of the game where you have to fight in mid-air, jumping and doing aerial attacks, and firing your projectile webs at them. In addition to the basic combat, you also have secret combos hidden in each level. Once you find a hidden combo, you can use it at any time. This adds some replay value to the game and gives you an incentive to explore the levels and complete them on other difficulties to find some of these combos. Some of them are quite well hidden, others are pretty much out in the open and you can't miss them. You can also pull up the combo list in the pause menu at any time during gameplay if you forget one of the combos. It keeps the combat feeling fresh and varied, and it doesn't feel at all repetitive. You also have a decent amount of enemy variety. Early in the game you fight thugs and gang members. Some of them are basic and will just use melee attacks. Others have guns and are slightly more dangerous. Some of them are armoured and take a little bit longer to beat. Later in the game you fight various robot enemies such as HKs and super soldiers and various others. These enemies are much tougher and much more resistant to your attacks. So the game's combat is fantastic and it has plenty of enemy variety throughout. You can replenish Spidey's health by finding health packs, and you can replenish his webbing finding web cartridges, which are scattered around each level in various locations. I mentioned earlier that the game has a stealth mechanic. Basically some of the indoor levels have a feature where you can hide in the shadows and sneak past certain enemies. Some of the later levels in the game actually require you to be stealthy to complete objectives, while avoiding detection. While this is a good idea in theory, unfortunately it feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity here. You can hide on the ceiling and sneak up on enemies, but unfortunately there's no feature to take out enemies quietly from behind. making stealth almost pointless in most of the levels. It would have been cool if they'd added a way to take out enemies from behind silently, kind of like you can in the Batman Arkham games. That would have made the game's stealth so much more fun in my opinion, and less wasted. There's a level towards the end of the game where you have to break into Oscorp and obtain some information, and you have these security guards who sound the alarm if they detect you. You basically have to beat the crap out of them to stop them raising the alarm, and they take way too long to defeat. An instant stealth takedown from behind, in my opinion, would have made that level so much better and so much more fun. But nonetheless, I'm still glad that it has a stealth mechanic because it just adds to the variety of the game. The game has some pretty cool boss battles. Green Goblin is of course the main villain of the game, since he was the main villain of the movie, and you fight him several times. You also fight Uncle Ben's killer, also from the movie. They also added several other villains from the Spider-Man comics for the sake of adding content, and I really do appreciate that. You fight the Shocker, the Vulture, Scorpion, Kraven the Hunter. You also fight this giant mech in the climax of the Oscorp levels called Oscorp's Ultimate Weapon. The Green Goblin boss battles in particular are very well done. You basically alternate between aerial combat and ground combat. You have to attack him in the air while avoiding his attacks to damage his glider. Then you do damage to him on the ground and fight him in hand-to-hand combat. The Vulture boss battle is very similar, with you having to ground him in order to do damage. So you have plenty of interesting boss battles throughout the game, and all of them feel unique in their own way. As far as the story goes, the game basically follows the story of the movie loosely. It has some authenticity, with both Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe reprising their roles from the movie, and both of them do an excellent job here. You can really tell that they enjoyed voicing these characters and had a lot of fun with it. Of course, several plot points were added that weren't in the movie, just to make the game longer and more interesting. It's to be expected. In addition to the main story, the game has numerous extra features and modes. You have several advanced training missions to have fun with, one of which being a horde mode that takes place in a wrestling ring, where you can practice all the game's combat moves at any time. This is a lot of fun to mess around with and just get used to the game's combat. And an awesome thing that they added to this mode was a secret boss battle against Bonesaw McGraw. Once you defeated all the other enemies, this was so cool. You also have several unlockable features in the game. By completing levels and objectives, you unlock points. These points unlock various features. Some features are also unlocked by completing the game on higher difficulties. You have a bowling minigame, which is absolutely hilarious, where you basically play 10-pin bowling, but instead of bowling pins, you knock over tied-up thugs, and instead of a bowling ball, you simply just swing forward and try to kick over as many thugs as possible. This feature is incredibly random, and I love it. Adding to the replay value, you also have several unlockable costumes. You have the Alex Ross Spider-Man costume, which is slightly darker and looks pretty badass. You also have the standard Peter Parker costume that you have in the game's training tutorial. I found it funny using this costume because there's a level where you have to take pictures of Spider-Man for the bugle, and if you wear the Peter Parker costume, he takes the pictures of Peter Parker. You can also unlock the wrestling costume that you use in the first few levels. Like I said before, these unlockable costumes do their bit to add to the replay value. And perhaps my favourite feature in the game, you can unlock the ability to play through the entire game again, but this time as Harry Osborn's Green Goblin. And this isn't just a cosmetic change, you actually have all the Green Goblin's gadgets and superpowers. Instead of swinging on webs and sticking to walls, you simply fly his glider around the levels. This applies to both the outdoor levels and the indoor levels. You have numerous gadgets and weapons to use at your disposal in this mode. You can throw several types of pumpkin bombs at enemies, doing huge amounts of damage. You also have a super speed attack that knocks enemies over. You can deploy razor bats that basically follow you around and act as your minions, basically fighting enemies for you. This is really cool. Seriously, razorbat minions might even be my favourite thing in the whole game, but I digress. You can fire bullets and missiles at enemies from your glider, and you can recharge most of your attacks by collecting web cartridges. In addition to all that, Green Goblin even has his own dialogue and is voiced by Josh Keaton.
Here's your purse back.
The way he is implemented into the story, while it doesn't make much sense and it skips the main cutscenes, I didn't really mind it. The crazy thing about it is that in my opinion, some of the levels are actually better when playing as Green Goblin, and his inclusion into the levels from a gameplay perspective doesn't feel out of place at all. Sure, some of the indoor levels and stealth sections are a little bit awkward in my opinion and take a bit of getting used to, because these levels are clearly designed for Spider-Man, but the outdoor levels in my opinion are even better when playing as Green Goblin, and they actually feel more suited to him than Spidey in my personal opinion. You can use his weapons and gadgets, as well as his super speed to exploit several sections of the game, and his gameplay overall is just so fun to play with, man. I really enjoyed it. It's a feature that they really didn't need to add, but I'm so glad they did, because it just adds so much more replay value to the game. You also have numerous production photos from the development of the movie, as well as a whole lot of concept art from the game that you can view in your gallery. You also have a movie viewer where you can basically go back and review some of the game's cutscenes and cinematics. So the game is fantastic, on par with pretty much every movie licensed game of its era. You have so much content and so many features that add so much replay value, making the game an absolute blast to play. If I was to find any criticisms for the game at all, I will say that the camera in some of the indoor levels is pretty bad and can get in your way and is a bit of a nuisance at times if I'm being honest. And as I mentioned before, the game's stealth mechanics are just underdeveloped and a bit of a wasted opportunity in my opinion. Some of the levels are way too short and could have been a bit more drawn out, but there are plenty of them and you can replay them at any time in the menu when you like. So overall, I think this game is a solid movie license game. It really is very good. I give this game a very solid 9 out of 10. It's a game that pretty much has everything that I would ask for a 2002 movie license game. The graphics and presentation are fantastic for the time, and the game overall just looks really great. It has great voice acting, a pretty badass soundtrack, and is very atmospheric in spots. It also has more features than I would have expected at the time. Thanks for watching guys, I had an absolute blast replaying Spider-Man the movie. This is a game that in my opinion is extremely underrated and never got the credit that it deserved really for its quality. As far as the game goes, it has plenty of features and plenty of replay value, and if I'm being honest, I would recommend it to any Spidey fan. It's certainly worth checking out. Stay tuned for my next review where I will be reviewing the sequel, Spider-Man 2. I'm really looking forward to reviewing that one. Thanks for watching and God bless.
Looks like you're done now. Go outside and play.